Okay, are we good to go?
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Stay safe online
29-minute video. Oh, this is why I put these off so much, because I think they're very long. I'll try not to pause too much.
by clicking the link below and get a huge discount off a 2-year plan with a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Also, why not grab yourself a character pin of the little corporal himself before they sell out? And big shout out to the patrons. Mrs. Bonaparte, board access, and maybe even a little behind-the-scenes content.
All
Okay,
right.
Mrs. Bonaparte, this is it. One last push, and we're done. Congratulations, it's a general. Oh, and here comes the rest of the army now. Did you just say the rest of the army?
Wow. And that's how French people are born.
History is full of great conquerors, many with very impressive origin stories. For example, Alexander the Great was the son of a king. Julius Caesar came from an aristocratic family that descended from a goddess. Great conquerors don't usually come from relatively insignificant families living on impoverished islands. But as it just so happens, that is where our story begins. In the early 18th century, the island of Corsica was a part of the Republic of Genoa, until one day Corsica said, hey, we're declaring independence, and it's probably not worth your time to try and stop us. So Genoa said,
I remember playing EU4 and I saw the flag to Corsica. That just like this dude's head with the bandana. I always thought it was a bit weird.
you're right, it isn't worth our time. Hey France, you want to buy this island? And France said, sure thing. And thus, Corsica became France, just in time for Napoleon to be born French. Many Corsicans didn't appreciate
that
their new
well timed,
conquerors,
eh?
however. And from an early age, Napoleon developed some fairly anti-French sentiments. Napoleon's dad, however, quickly embraced his new French overlords, which created some tension between dad and son.
Jeez.
Ooh, look at me. I'm dad. I wear powdered wigs and silver-buckled shoes, and I'm a traitor to the Corsican people. Go to your room, Napoleon. No, you go to your room,
Is there a good mod for Hoi 4? Yeah, it's called Le Resistance.
Dad. Okay. On the other hand, Napoleon adored his mother, who was definitely the disciplinarian of the family. And even though she would punish Napoleon severely, he kind of respected that. But Napoleon's parents wanted the best for their family. And since they were of very minor nobility, they were able to have Napoleon sent off to the shining lights and rat-infested sewage puddles of the big city. Napoleon went to military school in France. Okay, Napoleon, why don't you introduce yourself to your new classmates? Well, I'm Napoleon, and I hate all of you. Your farts smell like cheese, you can't pronounce the letter R, all you do is go on strike, and you call eggs oofs like a bunch of big dumb idiot dingleberries. Okay. Thanks, Napoleon. I hope you like being bullied. And bullied, he was. They picked on him for his Corsican accent, his family's lack of wealth, and it probably didn't help that he also had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. But he could hold his own, and on an average day, might be found dishing out ratatouille sandwiches for breakfast. He spent much of his time alone, and he loved reading about the great conquerors of history. He learned about Julius Caesar, and he wondered if one day he too might have a pizza franchise named after him. He excelled at math and geography, and when he graduated at the age of 16, he was made second lieutenant in an artillery.
That's an American joke, isn't it? I didn't realize that Caesar's was a pizza restaurant. I didn't know that. Little Caesar's is a pizza restaurant. When I think Caesar salad.
Regiment. Now, second lieutenant might sound pretty sweet to a screw-up like you, but Napoleon had a little something called ambition. Stonks of it. And he wasn't content being just some junior officer. He wanted to rise the ranks. Unfortunately for him, that would be a little difficult. Well, Napoleon, I've reviewed your application. It's clear you're very skilled and would be a perfect fit for the promotion. And Simeon, you're just about the biggest idiot I've ever seen. Your test results suggest you have the mental aptitude of a senile earthworm, and in the part of the form where you list your experience, you seem to have drawn a picture of a gerbil giving birth to a shoe. But your dad is the Marquis de la Fufayette, so you get the job. French society was just too closed off. Positions were handed out based on nobility, not talent, and the young Napoleon probably felt stuck. Wouldn't it be nice if, say, a revolution came along and changed all of that? Well, what are the chances? The French Revolution is here. Bastille toppling, head
Wow.
chopping,
Perfect
king
timing.
popping. The revolution promised to do away with the old social hierarchy and make everyone a little more equal. Napoleon may not have cared much for the violent mobs, but if it meant he could rise the ranks, he was in. He began fighting to defend the revolution. He put down a British-sponsored counter-revolution in Toulon and got promoted. He put down a royalist uprising in Paris and got promoted. And as his military prowess became more recognized, he was even given his very own army. It was astonishing progress for some.
Army of the Inferior. I would have liked to have seen more about when he joined the army. So he joined the army as an officer, I'm presuming, because he went to officer school. It doesn't explain that, does it?
Such a young man of humble origins, and Napoleon's wildest dreams were
I always got the impression with Napoleon that he did rise himself up the ranks slowly, like he was born basically almost a peasant. But I guess I'm getting the impression that that's not the case then.
coming true. But Napoleon also
Interior,
believed he
not
could increase his
inferior.
social status if he
Okay.
married an older rich lady. And so around this time, Napoleon went on the prowl. However, if some sources are to be believed, he was a verified creep. He reportedly had terrible luck with women, and most wanted nothing to do with him. Fortunately, he eventually met Josephine, an aging single
You sure
mother
that
who
wasn't
was deeply in
propaganda?
debt and needed stability, so she agreed to marry him despite finding him intensely disgusting. Napoleon, you dirty dog, you've done it. Unbeknownst to Napoleon, however,
sounds a bit like
Josephine had
propaganda.
a bit of a promiscuous reputation. Hey Napoleon, I hear you're marrying Josephine. Boy, she sure is a great kisser. That's right. Hey, wait, what do you mean she's a great kisser? Hey Hugo, you hear Napoleon's marrying Josephine? Wow, she sure is a great kisser. Now hang on just a minute. Hey everyone, Napoleon's marrying Josephine. Oh yeah, she sure is a great kisser. She's real good at kissing. Wow. I'm pretty sure I kissed her just yesterday. For goodness sake, is there anyone here who hasn't kissed my wife? Yeah, you. As Napoleon fell madly in love with his new wife, she fell madly in love with a man named Hippolyte. It wouldn't be long, however, before Napoleon would leave home.
Oh my
and
God,
go to
check out
war,
those borders,
because while
guys.
France was having its revolution, tensions in Europe were rising. Hey Austria, you'll never guess what we just did. What's that, France? I got 2 words for you. Revolution. We totally just socked it to our monarchy. What? Dude, the rest of us are monarchies. You've just totally threatened the balance of power in Europe. Now we have to worry about our stinky peasants rising up against us. I mean, holy hell, your queen is... Okay, France.
Oversimplified loves
pretty
this
awkward,
music.
And the rest of Europe is probably itching to give you a wedgie. But you're not ready for a war yet. So you gotta be cool, man. It's absolutely crucial that you say something to defuse the situation right now. Preposterous! I declare war. Sacre bleu! So France ended up at war with basically the rest of Europe, and the War of the First Coalition began. At first, France struggled, but then they started to do surprisingly well, and in many conquered territories, they began to establish sister republics, exporting their revolutionary ideas across Europe. In 1796, they planned a 3-pronged attack to take Vienna and knock Austria out of the war, with 2 magnificent armies in the north to kick ass, and Napoleon in the south as a bit of a diversion. For the first time, Napoleon would lead a military campaign. This was his chance to prove himself, to be somebody.
Oof.
And what a general he proved to be. The army he was given were demoralized, lacking equipment, and underpaid. But Napoleon galvanized them with inspirational speeches, and he took them into Italy. He was outnumbered, and his campaign was partially meant to be a sideshow, but he made it the main show. While the 2 northern armies were being held back, Napoleon made staggering progress. In a signature Napoleon move, he masterfully split his enemies into 2 and took them on separately, knocking Sardinia out of the war and putting the Austrians on the run. At the famous Battle of Lodi, he was in the fray, aiming the cannons himself, getting covered in mud, and earning the total respect of his men. They respected him so much that when he ordered an almost suicidal assault on the only bridge in town, his men threw themselves at it and took it despite fierce Austrian resistance. For Napoleon, it was all he needed to confirm that he was the greatest human who had ever existed. Wow, Napoleon, you're pretty great at this military stuff. Just be careful your head doesn't get too big. What did you just say to me, you little prick? And as Napoleon swept through northern Italy, the Italians cheered his arrival. Yes, I'm here to liberate you from your cruel Austrian oppressors.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
and replaced them with French ones. Napoleon plundered as he went, sending riches back to France to help its economy, but also paying his men the first real money they'd seen in years. The Pope had been supporting the Austrians, so Napoleon briefly went to go give him a slap. And as
There must be more of an explanation of why the French did so well in the first Revolutionary Wars other than Napoleon. Is it because they built a society more on equality that more people could join the army? Is that kind of what they did? Because to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense why the French army against the entirety of Europe seemed to do so incredibly well. There seems to be more. There should be more to it than that.
As he began to approach Vienna, the exhausted Austrians were forced to make peace, with Napoleon overseeing negotiations himself. He had just single-handedly knocked Austria out of the war. And by the way, he was only 28, so maybe it's about time you moved out of your dad's attic. In the Italian territory
Talking to you, chat.
he had conquered, Napoleon established new French sister republics, even writing constitutions and organizing governments himself, not something a general generally does. When he got back to France, he was hailed as a hero, and the extremely unpopular government were concerned he might get some power-hungry ideas, so they agreed he should go far away from France to Egypt, where he could maybe undermine British access to India. Napoleon was eager to win more glory, so he brought with him a team of scholars, and he was like, whoa, it's a freaky man-cat. Whoa, it's a big stick. Whoa, it's an ugly horse. Whoa, it's a stumpy little manlet. Hey, I'm actually average height for the time. But then British Admiral Nelson came down and wrecked his fleet, and an Anglo-Ottoman force defeated him at Acre, so Napoleon abandoned his men and went back to France. His campaign in Egypt hadn't gone quite as planned, but one thing you should know about Napoleon was that he was a skilled propagandist. He published his own newspapers that sometimes exaggerated his achievements, and even commissioned paintings that generally made him look cool. So when he returned to Paris, he was yet again hailed as a hero, and he began to get some power-hungry ideas. First, however, he had a bit of a problem to deal with. See, he had learned something shocking about his dear wife. Really, Josephine? This guy? I'm just as tall as him. I'm sorry, I swear. Now that you're becoming famous, I'll never do it again. Make sure you don't. I've never stooped so low as to cheat on you. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll be in this room consulting my generals for the next 30 minutes. And by consulting, I mean boinking. By my generals, I mean this woman. And by 30 minutes, I mean 2 seconds. Having dealt with his wife, Napoleon was then approached by a very...
I have to say that there's like a lot of like information about Napoleon that looks down upon him. Joke. Down upon him. Joke. And I feel like how much of this is propaganda because we know how it eventually ends because he loses. So how much of it is propaganda that was just continually spread across the generations till today? Like this idea that he was a failure with women, that his wife cheated on him, this idea that he was short, even though a lot of this information we know isn't quite accurate. So how much of this is actually true, or is it just rumors and stuff that spread through the generations?
Influential politician who said he had an idea. He wanted to stage a coup against the deeply unpopular government and needed the extremely popular Napoleon's help. And Napoleon thought that was just the darn tootinest idea. The plan was to trap the government and convince them to voluntarily give up their power. And here's how they did it. Hey guys, oh my gosh, quick! There's a dangerous Jacobin plot to overthrow you, which we definitely aren't just making up. Better get inside this cage so we can protect you. Okay. Gentlemen, we got him. In this case, the cage was an isolated palace outside of Paris, with no one around but Napoleon and his army. With the government inside, Napoleon then entered, and a pretty chaotic event ensued.
Coup, what do we say? Coup? It's very, This is the same way Mussolini took over in Italy, isn't it?
During which the government didn't seem entirely sure what was going on, Napoleon's men didn't seem entirely sure what was going on, and Napoleon himself didn't seem entirely sure what was going on. But thankfully, Napoleon's brother Lucien, president of the lower house, managed to regain control, and the remaining councilmen were intimidated into creating a new constitution. And thus, a new government was formed, this time with 3 consuls in charge. But after Napoleon did some rewriting, in the end, there was really only one man in charge, the first consul, him. And over the next few years, he worked to consolidate even more power, and essentially became a dictator in total control of France. And by the way, he was only 30, so maybe it's about time you washed your disgusting bedsheets. France was now ruled by possibly the greatest military leader of the time. Possibly the greatest? Or definitely Well, now was his chance to prove it. See, back when Napoleon was still in Egypt, being Indiana Jones. Back home, France was in France, being France. They had conquered even more territory, and they were like, hey Piedmont, you get revolutionary ideals. Hey Switzerland, you get revolutionary ideals. And Rome, you get revolutionary ideals. Everybody gets revolutionary Oh, hey guys, nice sledgehammers. And Naples, very cool nail gun. You guys here to get some revolutionary ideas? As France was still spreading the revolution, and with Napoleon busy in Egypt, the European powers felt the time was right for round 2, and the War of the Second Coalition began. And this time, their big bad boy buddy Russia was here to bang some French boys back to Bordeaux. And bang them, they did. France got blasted. But then Russia pulled out after stalling in Switzerland, and now that Napoleon was in charge of the country, he was ready to start blasting right back. He took command of the army.
How much of a pain in the ass must it be for Napoleon? These areas that he's already conquered, these areas he's already walked over his own troops, these areas he's already fought battles and won over, he has to visit them again and do the exact same thing again. Oh my God, that's so frustrating. Can you imagine playing EU4 and having to reconquer the territory you've already conquered over and over again, recoring it over and over again, wasting your admin points? Pain.
Army of the Reserve, and he brought the fight to the Austrians. Now, there are many traits that made Napoleon a great military leader. I already mentioned one of them, how he was one of the boys and commanded the total loyalty of his men. But now we see a second reason, the element of surprise. In 1800, Napoleon moved to Geneva, and it looked like he was probably going to take on the Austrian forces in Germany. There's no way he'd be crazy enough to move his entire army south through the Alps as a surprise attack on the Austrians besieging Genoa. Oh, Napoleon's moving his entire army south through the Alps as a surprise attack on the Austrians besieging
Hannibal, you say?
Genoa. Napoleon's crossing of the Alps is legendary, and you may have seen one of the most famous paintings of the general, popping a sick wheelie on his majestic stallion surrounded by dangerous mountain terrain. Of course, in real life, he made the crossing
Wheelie. He's on 2 wheels there. Lies.
on a depressed mule, but that's not as cool. When he emerged in Italy, the Austrians expected him to come break their siege, but Napoleon went for their supply line.
See how much of that is an actual truth as well. Like, the image showed him on a stallion, on doing a, I don't even know what you would call that on a horse, doing a wheelie, as he says. But then he was actually on a donkey. Like, how much of that is actual fact, you know?
Near Milan, forcing the Austrians to meet Napoleon head-on at the famous Battle of Marengo. The Austrians initially clobbered the outnumbered French, and they were like, hooray, we won. But then a few hours later, Napoleon showed up again with an even bigger army, and he clobbered them right back. Holy cow, this tiny little fun-sized French guy is running rings around us.
Hey! I'm average height for the time, you jerk!
Then, after General Moreau's victory at Hohenlinden, Vienna was exposed, and the Austrians again sued for peace. Just like the War of the First Coalition, the Second Coalition ended in another French victory. But in many ways, they both felt more like Napoleon victories. Only the UK.
This is something I don't think gets reflected very well in map games like Hoi 4 and EU4. This idea that conquering large areas of land in like 2 or 3 wars is really difficult to keep control of and pin down and keep loyal to your faction. Where I feel like in Hoi, the resistance system might be a bit of a pain in the ass, but the truth behind it is it's relatively easy to keep the masses under your control, isn't it?
They remained at war with Napoleon.
And EU4, sure, the rebels can be annoying and coalitions can be a nightmare. The truth, though, it's not be-all and end-all, isn't it? You could take large swarms of land and it doesn't make a lot of difference. Core it, it's like it's yours, isn't it?
And they were using their powerful navy to blockade French ports and were even seizing the cargoes of neutral ships. Obviously, everyone else got pretty pissed off that the British were interfering with their trade. So in response, they formed a league. And they embargoed the UK right back. Neutral countries protecting their own interests? That's offensive. So Britain went to Copenhagen and blew a bunch of stuff up, and the league disbanded. But because the UK's economy was pretty bust, they decided to sign a treaty with France in 1802. For the first time in a long time, Europe was at peace. Congratulations, sire.
Peace of Italy, peace of Netherlands,
Pierre, but not
peace
for
of Germany.
Long. I still don't trust those dirty Brits. Did you hear they've been calling me the Bony Man? What does that even mean? Keep an eye on them, would you? I can't, sire. Why not? Because they use NordVPN.
No!
Server whilst comes with pat heels in, for example, and watch some over no channel. So thank you. Defeating. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Crossing the Alps, defeating the Austrians, and Europe at peace.
I've got a serious question for you guys. Just any of you use these VPN services? they must have a lot of money because they're advertising so much to YouTubers. So there must be a lot of money for this based on people using it. Does anyone use it? No, use it. People who do use it, what do you use it for? No, yes, no. Yeah, people who actually do use it, what do you actually use it for? Use it for Netflix? Do you even need a VPN to pirate anymore? You don't, do you? Can't you just, on a torrent app, can't you just mark it as anonymous data? There's like encryption built within the torrents, isn't there? I'm really surprised, Dawson. I'm surprised you would use it because I'm actually kind of surprised you would use it, actually. Surely you can just encrypt the data for the torrent. You don't need to use a VPN. And also, VPNs can be so slow sometimes as well. Music in China. Well, actually, that makes a lot of sense, actually. If you're in a country that has a massive firewall, then...
What a meteoric...
Yeah, you do, but Sky, BT, and Virgin, no. We'll talk about that later.
rise it had been for the young Corsican. He had just taken charge of a nation that appeared to be losing a war and turned it all around.
So 98% of people being cautious about illegal downloads and 2% actually going through internet censorship. The internet censorship one makes sense, like Iran or China. It's funny because the people selling VPNs never mention illegal downloads. They never mention it, do they? The reference people always use is like Netflix in America has more movies. You've had letters from Virgin. Interesting.
Securing French gains in Europe.
Interesting.
But there was now a big question. You see, throughout the chaotic French Revolution, French governments had struggled to keep the economy afloat. They often didn't have a whole lot of support, and they frequently came and went. Would Napoleon finally be the man who could stick around? Military victories were one thing, but could the general also govern? Spoiler alert. Yes. The economy's crumbling? Well, then why don't you have yourself a new national bank, currency reform, and improved taxation and welfare systems? The legal system is an incoherent mess.
Reforms.
Well, then why don't we nicely wrap all those civil laws up into one new
Shamanic
centralized
law.
legal code? Corrupt government officials? Throw them in the trash. Bad infrastructure? Throw it in the trash. Women's rights? Throw them in the trash. Wait, really? Well, yeah, unfortunately, while Napoleon was building on the equality of the revolution, he also largely scaled back rights for certain groups, and husbands had full legal control over their wives. But come on, ladies, maybe let men have a slice of the pie for once, okay? Napoleon further reformed education, ensuring a system based on individual ability, meaning now Simeon had to compete with everyone else, and Napoleon could get the cream of the crop to help him run the republic. But he wasn't just building on the ideas of the revolution. The revolution had led to a lot of chaos, and Napoleon needed stability.
Is there some examples of the Napoleonic Code that we can look up? I'd really like to see what it actually did. Really curious. It's probably something that's such an unbelievably large topic. It's hard to like get it in bullet points to actually find out what it actually does. Divided into 4 sections: person's property, acquisition of property, civil procedure. This is such an unbelievably big topic. I don't think I can get like a small defined definition. We'll see if we can find a video on that a little bit later. Not books. Reads books these days. Come on.
Stability. So he rolled back a couple things, most notably with religion. The revolution had pretty much kicked the Catholic Church to the curb, but most notably with religion.
Is this Spiffing Brit?
The revolution had pretty much kicked the Catholic Church to the curb, but Napoleon understood that since many French citizens still considered themselves Catholic, that could be a problem. So he came to an agreement with the Pope and brought back the Church, only this time with some pretty hefty power limitations. He also ensured freedom for other religions, and is often noted for his positive treatment of...
Sorry for all the pausing. Do you feel like his intentions weren't pure with this? Like he was looking at ways of pulling power from marginalized groups and giving it to French people, pulling power from the church and giving it to himself. Like it felt like the idea was to kind of like centralize more power on himself
of Jewish
Even if the knock-on effects of what he was doing may have been more beneficial than he originally intended.
people at a time of widespread anti-Semitism. But while all of this may make Napoleon sound like a pretty stand-up dude, it's good to note that he believed in religious freedom because he thought it was a powerful tool to keep the poor from eating the rich, or something like that. Overall, Napoleon's aim was to end the chaos of the revolution and finally create a stable and prospering French republic. And in that aim, he seemed to be largely successful and generally popular with the people of France. He officially declared that the revolution is over, adding, "I am the revolution." Napoleon's head could be seen for miles. Of course, not everyone was happy with Napoleon's reforms. Conservatives felt he was too radical. Radicals felt he was too conservative. But since Napoleon was a dictator,
Isn't that politics today?
opposition could usually be stamped out with some good old-fashioned iron fisting. In 1804, Napoleon took one last major step. After some failed attempts were made to assassinate him, he wanted to strengthen his position and ensure his dynasty could live on after him. And so he decided being first consul for life simply wasn't quite enough. He decided he should become emperor. He held a vote, asking the French people if they were cool with the idea, and they returned a definitely not rigged 99.9% in favor. The ball's on this man. And so on the 2nd of December, 1804, in an elaborate ceremony at Notre Dame, Napoleon was made emperor. The Pope was even invited to attend, and normally he would crown
When you become a republic and you become so republic, you become an emperor. It's like it goes around on itself. Don't become too republic, guys.
an emperor. But to make sure everyone knew this wasn't some Charlemagne-style circular power division, Napoleon lifted the crown and placed it on his own head. Like I said, the ball's on this man. He was now Emperor of the French. Well, Napoleon, you were a general, then you became first consul for life, and now you're an emperor. Is it enough yet? Is your ambition finally satisfied? I don't know, Pierre. What comes after emperor? I would say God, sire. You want to be a god? Yes. I'll put it down under maybe. Okay, everyone. What the hell is going on? This Corsican guy showed up out of nowhere, and he's kicking our ass. He's exporting the ideas of the French Revolution wherever he goes. And he just declared himself King of Italy and Emperor. He can't do that. I'm the Emperor. Oh, hey, fellow monarchs. I see you're having a monarch party. My invite must have got lost in the mail. I'll just set up a spot right here. Wow. You don't belong here, Napoleon. We're coming to take you down. I'd like to see you try.
You know, this is interesting because it tells you what a monarch is. A monarch is not just a hereditary ruler, you know? It's also something that everyone has to conform and believe they're a monarch too. The concept of legitimacy just means so much in this circumstance, doesn't it? And if you are just to put a crown on your head and say, I'm the king, and your people think you're king, it's not just that. It has to make the whole world agree that you are the king of that set nation. And this is technically what this is, isn't it?
Whoa, I'm so scared I just pooed my pants. Hey, everyone, I just pooed my pants.
I love the animations. The animations are so good.
No, but I did just poo my pants. Before Napoleon had even declared himself emperor, the British had already redeclared war on France because both sides had been violating their previous...
That's a really good point, yeah. You are more likely to believe a monarch is legitimate if you are a relative of that set monarch. I've just realized something. This map is traced from Google Maps. You can actually see the edges of the land that's been traced over the top. That's really interesting. I wonder why he's done that. Why would you not delete the original template that was underneath it after it was traced? Huh. Interesting. I wonder why. Okay.
treaty. Napoleon immediately occupied Hanover and then began making plans for a great British invasion, partially paid for by selling a huge chunk of land to the United States. Napoleon gathered his army along the English Channel. But here was the problem. While Napoleon's powerful army would almost certainly obliterate the British on land, there was very little chance he'd actually make it across the Channel, because Britannia ruled the waves. This power dynamic would keep the two traditional enemies from engaging in much real direct combat throughout the Napoleonic Wars. However, the British had something else up there.
I mean, it's not really a big deal. I mean, the only reason you guys are aware of it is because I made a note of it. But it just shows that he originally used the map of Europe from Google Maps, or some of the map software, and he's traced the country shapes over the top of Google Maps. But I don't understand why they've not removed the original Google Map layer underneath that. I'm just curious. I don't know why.
Their sleeve. Copious amounts of money. They were willing to throw cash at anyone who would go to war against Napoleon, and there were plenty of takers. Austria?
Because this map is really complex, by the way. This is not something that's easily done and made really quickly. And the fact that he's got like editing on the go with this is a really complex map. This is not something like 2 minutes in Photoshop, you know?
Russia, Naples, and Sweden, hoping to put Napoleon's France back in its place, formed a third coalition against France. The coalition forces probably displaced Austria from the third, Naples, and Sweden, hoping to put Napoleon's
I'm curious about Spain here. Why is Spain aligned with
France back in its place, formed a third coalition against France. The coalition forces probably thought that this time they stood a chance. They weren't prepared for the total humiliation they were about to suffer. The war of the third coalition was Napoleon at his best. We've already learned.
I just want to say I'm really enjoying this video, by the way. This video is really, really well put together.
Two ways in which Napoleon was a great military
I ever watched
commander,
Waterloo now.
But here comes one of the biggest reasons. Speed. He had reorganized his army into corps, which were themselves, basically, small armies. Each had their own infantry, cavalry, and artillery, and as a result, was able to act more independently. They spread out through the countryside, and by living off the land, rather than relying on heavy supply trains, they were able to move extremely quickly. Napoleon would traverse massive distances, outmaneuver his enemies, isolate them, and then move in for the kill, before they even knew what was going on. Lightning warfare leading to total destruction.
Damn!
Would you like to see him do it? Here we go. Lightning warfare leading to total destruction.
Core system, decisive action, live off the land, divide enemy armies, destroy enemy in a quick, decisive battle. Interesting.
Would you like to see him do it? Here we go. Part of the coalition's plan was for the Russians to meet up with the Austrians and take on Napoleon together.
You won't let them meet up.
They could turn the tide against him, so Napoleon needed to stop them from ever meeting.
Yep.
But he's all the way over in Boulogne. No problem. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon marched 200,000 men in secret, encircling Austrian General Mack and capturing his entire army. A devastating blow. Napoleon.
The Battle of Ulm! Battle of Ulm! Ulm! I used to love to do this at work, you know. I'd load up like a Wikipedia article and read it from top to bottom. This is the most entertainment you get in a day in a call center. 80,000 French against 40,000 Austrians. Oh, shite. 27,000 captured. My God.
And later remarked, "I have destroyed the Austrian army by simply marching." Next, he turned to face the approaching Russians. Okay, it looks like the French are coming for us, but check this out. I've got an amazing idea. When they approach, we run away. Sir, you're a genius. The Russians began to retreat with Napoleon giving chase, and since his tactics relied on quick victories, this could be a problem, especially because the longer the war went on, the more likely it looked other countries may join the coalition against him. But Napoleon knew the Russian Tsar, Alexander I, was young and seeking glory, so he came up with an idea to lure him in. He sent him a message. What does it say? It says, "Hello, I'm just a little baby boy, and I'm very scared." Are you talking like that, or is he? He is, sir. Why is he doing that? I don't know, but it's very cute, helpless, and vulnerable. A little baby boy, eh? Very scared, eh? Cute, eh? Boris, get my crossbow. We're going hunting. The Allied forces turned to face Napoleon, who they now believed was in a vulnerable position. He was set up at Austerlitz, and to make it look like he was retreating,
I know this
he had
battle.
even evacuated the high ground. A thick fog set in, obscuring Napoleon's center, as the Allies took the bait and set up on the heights. From there, they spotted Napoleon's very weak-looking right flank, and they descended the heights to go get it.
Bait.
Little did they know, it was exactly what Napoleon was hoping they'd do. The next thing they knew, a large French force was emerging from the fog, launching a huge central assault up the hill. They swung around, crushing the Allies, and as men attempted to flee across the frozen lakes, Napoleon ordered his artillery to fire on the ice, causing an unknown number to drown. But he told me he was just a little baby boy. What happened? He tricked you, sir. You mean I was the little baby boy all along? It was Napoleon's masterpiece, and Austria were once again forced to make peace with France. Then, with the French conquest of Naples in 1806, the War of the Third Coalition ended as yet another Napoleon victory. This was the third time Napoleon had to give Austrian Emperor Francis a good spanking. And so, with the peace treaty in 1805, Napoleon was determined to punish him. He was forced to give up territory, hand over significant compensation, and promised never to fight Napoleon again.
It's interesting this because it shows the Napoleon inadvertently, without him actually realizing, he was drawing the modern borders of Italy.
For now, Russia, Sweden, and the UK remained at war with France, but none were able to offer much of a threat. And so, Napoleon got to work strengthening his grip over Europe. He gave out rule of captured territories to his family and friends, and most notably, he established a new confederation in Germany, with himself as its protector. Seeing his influence in Germany being wiped away, Emperor Francis acknowledged reality and officially dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, an entity that had existed for over 1,000 years.
Rip.
But it wasn't all good news for Napoleon. For one thing,
I wonder why he didn't make himself the emperor of the HRE. I wonder if he saw that was more of an Austrian thing. Technically it was, wasn't it? Technically the Austrian ruler was the Holy Roman Emperor, wasn't he?
Spain had earlier allied with France in 1804 because the British just couldn't help themselves from blowing up Spanish ships, and Napoleon hoped a combined French-Spanish fleet would eventually be able to invade England. Unfortunately, he received word that British Admiral Nelson had engaged his fleet at Trafalgar.
Rip.
Normally, naval battles looked like this, but in this case, Nelson did this. Was it because he was an idiot? No. It's because he was a genius. He successfully punched through the Franco-Spanish line and unleashed hell. His victory ensured British control of the sea, and his death during the battle made him a legend. Napoleon's hopes for a future British invasion were gone. But not just that. Napoleon was also hoping to secure peace on the continent, but that...
Have I visited HMS Victory? No, but I've been to Trafalgar Square like a dozen times.
wasn't looking likely because the Prussian king was under pressure from his wife. Frederick, he's established a confederation in our turf, and he told us he'd give us Hanover, but then offered it to the British. You have to declare war on him. What is it with you and war? What is it with you and being a cupcake?
Why be a double emperor? More prestige, come on.
Go to war! Okay. In October 1806, Prussia, with its famed military tradition, joined the coalition and declared war, beginning the War of the Fourth Coalition. Unfortunately, Prussian King Frederick William III wasn't the smartest tool in the shed. Look at him over there, being all French. Makes me sick. Boys, we'll get him this time. But here's the thing. This time, we have to stick together. Do not under any circumstances face Napoleon by yourself. You all saw what happened to Austria. Hey, where'd Fred go? Hey, you jerk. Think you're some kind of big shot? Huh? Want to tangle with Fred? You don't got the cojones. We're screwed. Without consulting its allies, Prussia had gone ahead and sent Napoleon an ultimatum, demanding he move all his forces out of Germany. Now, some of you watching this video probably can't even wipe your own bum yet.
True! True!
But even you know, you don't just send Napoleon an ultimatum. Obviously, Napoleon went in for the kill. Prussia's army was quite outdated, so when they met Napoleon at the twin battles of Jena and Auerstedt, it wasn't even close. Even Marshal Davout's heavily outnumbered corps at Auerstedt sent the Prussians running, and Napoleon carried out a ruthless pursuit of his fleeing enemy, taking Berlin and within a single month decimating the Prussian forces. Frederick William and the remnants of his army moved to the east. At this point, Napoleon's forces were pretty tired. Winter had come, and conditions were miserable.
Unless you're fully vaccinated.
Both sides would settle into winter quarters, but Russia decided to try their hand at an unexpected winter attack. A series of brutal battles followed that took a heavy toll on both sides, including the vicious Battle of Eylau, fought in blizzard conditions. Men froze to death, and many deserted. The Russian artillery tore the French to shreds, and Napoleon himself was momentarily under risk of being captured. In the end, the French army was saved thanks to a legendary cavalry charge by Napoleon's flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat. After the horror inflicted on both sides, they decided it might be a good idea not to do any more fighting until after winter. Then, after winter came, and the fighting continued. The Russians were pushed back to Friedland, where Russian General Bennigsen made a bit of a blunder by positioning himself with the Aller River to his back. The French artillery were able to pin the Russians between the river and their concentrated gunfire, a major element in Napoleon's fighting style, and many Russians drowned as they tried to escape. War of the Fourth Coalition. Victory, Napoleon.
Oof. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. That 29 minutes flew by because I was having so much fun. That was actually really, really good. Oh my God, I was actually having a lot of fun watching that. Oh no, I don't like the way Spain looks in this picture. Part 2 now. 1 minute. Yeah, do you know, a lot of the jokes are really cringe, but do you know what? It actually makes the video really lighthearted and really fun. You know, I feel like there's a lot to learn from this video because I feel like I delete a lot of jokes from my videos because they're too cringe. But the truth is, cringe jokes are still good jokes, you know? I think you'll enjoy the Waterloo film, maybe. Have I heard about the Darkest Hour mod got delayed for 2 months? No. Why? Is it to do with the new patch? There's a new patch broke the mod. Oh no. Let me just read the chat. Have you seen any of the other Oversimplified videos? Yeah, most of them. Yeah, most of them. I think as you've been making newer and newer videos, they've been getting longer and longer, haven't they? I think the older ones weren't that long. They're waiting for Barbarossa. Interesting.
This video was made possible by
Oh, actually, we were going to watch some of the other stuff, weren't we? So this is what One Proud Bavarian linked. Interesting. Wow. Okay. So it shows the impact of Napoleonic law. Napoleonic law. Because in the UK, they always reference common law quite frequently when it comes down to like filming in public and whatnot. And I never really knew what it meant. But I'm not an expert legal system, so this doesn't mean a great deal to me. But it does show the impact of Napoleonic law. I had to think about it as I was saying it. Napoleonic law. Napoleonic. Yeah, the Falcons one I watched a long time ago. And they stole my ad revenue for that. God damn it, Oversimplified. I love you.
By 1800, France's legal system was a mishmash of old and new laws. The provincial laws left over from the days before the French Revolution were still intact in many places, with Roman law dominating in the southern provinces and medieval common law holding sway in the north. At the dawn of the Revolution, the French people could be subject to 400 different legal codes, depending on where they lived. On top of all that, the French Revolution had added its own laws to the mix. While revolutionaries overturned...
So one, there wasn't a universal law for the nation of France. It was a mishmash of lots of different kinds, so it was a very complex system.
Many of the older laws, they also introduced over 14,000 new pieces of legislation. Some lawmakers saw the need to meld all of these laws into a single code, but their attempts to do so failed. When Napoleon Bonaparte took control of France as the powerful first consul in 1799, he decided that the French legal system required some vast revisions. There should be one law for everyone, Napoleon believed. In 1800, he appointed a commission to help develop a...
You tend to find this, that when there's a lots of complex different ways of doing things and then you make it a universal system throughout the entire nation, it tends to always work out more beneficial. When you streamline things and simplify them, they tend to become more efficient. You could say, oversimplify.
A unified code of law that would apply to all French people in every part of France. Headed by the legal expert Jean-Jacques Régis de Cambacérès, this commission met 87 times to discuss, design, and draft this new legal code. Napoleon himself took part in 36 of these meetings to make sure that the commission was including his own agenda and ideas. By the second half of 1801, the commission was ready to draft the new code. 4 writers worked on the project, led by lawyer Jean-Étienne Marie Portalis, who composed several key portions of the code, including the sections on marriage and property. By the end of the year, the code was finished, but its publication was delayed until March 21, 1804. On that day, France officially received its new civil code, which later became known as the Code Napoleon, or Napoleonic Code. The new code consisted of 2,281 articles in 3 books. The first book, of persons, dealt with civil rights, French citizenship, residence, marriage and family, and divorce.
Ah, no. We only got to watch a little bit. Okay. I don't feel too invested in this. It seems kind of boring. I have a funny suspicion that this might not be all on Napoleon. Because Napoleon just came around at the right time, at the right place, had enough power and enough influence. He managed to push this through the government of France. And it might not be less about Napoleon's actual influence and ideas and more about he had the power to do it.
In the year 1799, Napoleon Bonaparte saved his country in its time of need. We owe every ounce to the May we demand identity.
Guys, listen to me. If you're going to be a video essayist, when you deliver the script, make sure you're just not reading directly from the script, okay? Because believe it or not, but Oversimplified reads from a script. He scripts all his videos before he produces them. This guy's done the same, but listen to how he delivers the script in comparison to Oversimplified.
With our new laws, only the wise may be kings or queens, as long as the people of France can safely command their competence.
Quickly after this law passed, we realized how many criminals were amongst our ranks. France had quite the amount of men.
Okay. Episode 2, Oversimplified, Napoleonic Wars. Oh, God, yeah. Oh, my God. Listen, dude, there's nothing wrong with this guy's content, okay? He makes great content, all right? But, my God, here's a little tip for you. Stand up in your chair, put your microphone close to your mouth, do a few star jumps. Bring yourself up your chest and then speak with enthusiasm and a little bit of passion in your voice. This is, Let's see if I can find the Daily Dozen guy. I know, his voice is so... Meme guy. Is he meme? He does memes, right? Is it Daily Dozen? Am I thinking of someone else? Daily Dose, not Daily Dozen.
Hello everyone, this is your Daily Dose of Internet.
Oh my God, if I did this to Stormy, he would rip my eyeballs out.
We'll use a drone. Scientists will use a drone and hover over a whale and wait for it to blow water so they can study their mucus. For it to blow water so they can study their mucus.
How does he do that? How does he speak at the same tone for every single word he delivers? Every single tone sounds exactly the same. How do you even do that? I can't even do that if I try. I'm trying to get one of those pitch websites. What am I doing? What's one of those websites where you can create pitch? Oh man, I can't find it when I want it. Oh, screw you. There's like a website that you can go onto and you can make it play a specific pitch. And I can't find the website. Oh, it's so annoying. Maybe it just goes super dum-dum. Website that plays pitch hurts, bitch. What? No. Oh, there we go. So this guy has the innate ability of speaking with the exact same pitch, but every single word he delivers. How does he even do it? I don't even know how you do this. This is a talent.
Scientists will use a drone and hover over a whale and wait for it to blow water so they can study their mucus.
Oh, God. I'm going to save this website somewhere because I'll probably end up using it at some point. Okay. Listen, no disrespect to Daily Dose, but man, the Bitsy voice acts are like really monotone. God damn. Talk to aliens, yeah. Okay, second episode, Oversimplified. Napoleon. All right, 3, 2, 1, part 2.
Sued for peace, and they all met on a raft on a river for negotiations. They had been fighting for the past 4 years, but now Napoleon and Alexander surprisingly got along like a house on fire. They laughed together. They chatted long into the night. They kissed. The two had a lot of
That expression, gets on like a house on fire. What does that even mean?
mutual respect, and Napoleon even told his wife that if Alexander were a woman, I would make him my mistress. Kind of a weird thing to say to your wife, Napoleon. In the end, they came to an amicable agreement. Russia would lose barely any land, and in return, they'd join France against the UK and invade Sweden. Win-win. On the other hand, Frederick William III was sidelined, and Prussia lost an enormous amount of territory to French client states. Only the UK remained as the last major threat to Napoleon, and they continued to be a big thorn in his side, constantly funding his enemies and using their powerful navy to wreak havoc on French trade and overseas colonies. But what could Napoleon do? The British were safe across the channel. Well, he said, if I can't fight you with guns, I'll fight you with money. Earlier in 1806, Napoleon had...
Yeah, guys, let's be real right now. If you've watched 2 of my live streams in a row, back to back, you've not subscribed, you are technically stealing from me. So you might want to like go into hiding. It's a joke. Goddamn, chill.
announced the Continental System, a total shutoff of the UK from continental trade. No one in Europe was to trade with Britain, and Napoleon hoped that by hitting their economy, he could force them to negotiate. The British economy did take a hit, and they responded in their typical fashion, by going to Copenhagen and blowing a bunch of stuff up. But in general, the British managed to stay afloat by simply increasing their trade with other parts of the world. Many neutral countries found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place as the 2 European superpowers demanded they cease trade with the enemy. Hey America, you better not trade with the French or else I'll come burn down the White House. What? This is gonna wreck my economy. I need to start saving money. How the heck am I gonna start saving money? Yeah, that's right, you know where this is going. Do you like Shopify? Gel. Forza yet? Get simplified. Oh yeah. Making peace with the Russians, a continental blockade, and blowing up Copenhagen. Sick of being blown up for doing almost nothing, and under significant pressure from Napoleon, the Danish officially sided with France. But Napoleon's blockade had the biggest effect on continental Europe, who were now cut off from a major trading partner, one that controlled the seas and held a rich, growing empire. And a lot of countries didn't fully comply. Portugal, a traditional British ally, refused to take part. No problem. Napoleon sent an army and invaded. But it wasn't just Portugal. Many of Napoleon's allies were also...
I'm curious about this partition here. Is this land that's been given to Spain, or is this a client state? What's going on here?
So suspect. Your Majesty, it seems that Spain isn't properly enforcing your blockade. Spain? Why not? Well, it appears they've been trying to find a way out of being your ally since they lost their fleet at Trafalgar. What is with these people? It's almost like everyone's only pretending to be my ally because they know otherwise I'd beat them up. Do I even have any real friends? Are you my friend, Pierre? Say yes or I'll slap you. Napoleon had come to mistrust his ally to the south, and in particular, Napoleon thought the Spanish royal family were an incompetent mess. All right, Carlos, you've got to get it together. How can I trust you when all you do is go hunting? Meanwhile, you let this ambitious nobody who dislikes me run the country, and you seem to be the only person in the universe who doesn't realize he's boinking your wife. And what's worse... Who the heck are you? I'm the king's son. I just overthrew my dad. So, actually, now I'm the king. You people are the biggest cluster of shameless, narcissistic idiots and all around just the worst people I've ever met. Here, have a Kid's Choice Award. French forces, many having conveniently already entered Spain to invade Portugal, occupied Spanish forts, and Napoleon invited the Spanish royals to France.
The jokes sometimes are a little bit low-key, aren't they?
To help mediate their differences.
All right.
We're here with the royal family of Spain. So, Fernando, you've been...
Whoa, 300 bits. Thank you so much, bro. I'm going to pause the video for 3 seconds because of you. Thanks to you, bro.
Accused of plotting against your father and vying for the Spanish throne. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, Napoleon, I just think great. Well, I've got the test results right here. Fernando, in the case of the Spanish throne, you are not the king. And Carlos, you are also not the king. I'm the king! Actually, Napoleon made his brother the king, but for all intents and purposes, Spain was now his puppet. He expected the Spanish people to be over the moon at the removal of their unpopular royal family. Imagine his surprise when it turned out that people don't really like to be subjugated by a foreign power, least of all one who had previously attacked the Catholic Church. And so the people of Spain revolted. Brutal fighting broke out as bands of armed Spaniards ambushed French troops across the kingdom, and vicious atrocities were committed on both sides. In addition to fighting the regular Spanish and Portuguese forces, the French had to contend with tens of thousands of guerrilla fighters throughout the Spanish countryside. The British even took the opportunity to land an army led by the future Duke of Wellington. And now, British forces were defeating French ones on land. Napoleon briefly went to Spain in person, and he did drive back the Allied armies, but before long, his attention was needed.
I remember watching a video about this a long time ago, and Wellington's army tried its absolute best to not engage with Napoleon's army in Spain. So, as much as Mike comes across like, well, we were winning battles against Napoleon, it's technically not really true. They were doing their absolute best to avoid Napoleon's army and waste his time in Spain.
Elsewhere. The whole thing became a nightmare for the emperor. He excelled at traditional warfare, but this was something more akin to Napoleon's Vietnam. The whole conflict would keep hundreds of thousands of French soldiers and resources.
What is this? I've just realized something. This has just triggered me. What does this look like? What is this? What is this? What is this? Huh? What does this remind you of? Huh? Huh? What does this remind you of? Oh, thanks for subscribing, Banana Monkey. I appreciate that. Love you. Thanks for the run up. What does this remind you of? What does it remind you of? You guys are not going to get it, are you? The Hottie for Spanish Civil War. That's right. The Hottie for Spanish Civil War. God damn it. I'm triggered already.
Bogged down for years, Napoleon was never able to break the will of the Spanish people, and this problem weakened his position in Europe. Hey, Francis. Want to go to war with Napoleon again? Oh, I don't know, Britain. He's already whomped me 3 times. I'll give you £1 bazillion. Well, okay. Seeing that Napoleon was now caught up in Spain, and with some British funding, Austria decided maybe, just maybe, this time, they'd have a chance. So did they? No. Napoleon defeated them in just 4 months. It was quick, but it wasn't exactly easy. The Austrians had been watching Napoleon and learning, and they had made some reforms, while Napoleon, after years of war, was increasingly having to rely on inexperienced conscripts. So this time, the Austrians gave him a run for his money. The Fifth Coalition saw some of the bloodiest battles to date, including Napoleon's first major defeat, and when he did finally defeat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, it was a very costly victory. Still, Napoleon had yet again kicked Francis's butt, and as part of the peace terms, Austria lost a bunch more land. Not long after, however, Napoleon and Francis came to another agreement. It was decided that Napoleon would marry Francis's young daughter. But wait, doesn't Napoleon already have a wife? Well, yes, he did. Josephine and Napoleon had become quite fond of one another, but now that Napoleon was playing the monarch game, he needed a male heir, and his aging wife wasn't giving him one. So it was out with the old and in with the new. At least he didn't behead anyone. For Austria, they felt that if Napoleon was going to keep on winning, they may as well be on his side. So through the marriage, Napoleon got an alliance with Austria and a beautiful baby potato. Between the failing blockade against Britain with Austria and a beautiful baby...
What is this? Can you imagine if you commissioned someone to do art of you and they gave you this?
Potato.
Could you make me look good? No problem.
Between the failing blockade against Britain, the ongoing war in Spain, and now his recent struggles in Austria, cracks in Napoleon's invincibility were beginning to show. But still, look at this map. So blue, so beautiful. Even Sweden, after being pulverized by Russia, overthrew their king, and after an interesting chain of events, ended up putting one of Napoleon's own marshals in charge. Marshal Bernadotte took the name Karl Johan and became Crown Prince of Sweden.
Johan? Johan?
They're agreeing to join Napoleon's continental system. For now,
PDX was born.
Sweden was Team France. Napoleon was on top of the world. He had won an endless string of victories. All he had to do now was sit back and not make any major miscalculations that could completely turn the tide of war. So let's see what comes next.
You know, in a way, you can see why Napoleon started to fail. He got impatient, didn't he? Having to do these wars, which are basically rinse and repeat wars over and over and over again, must have been really frustrating for him. Like, I'm fighting Austria like 5-6 times, and we're no closer to having peace than we were to begin with. And I can understand why with Spain, why he got frustrated and just put on a puppet rule and overthrew the existing Spanish king. Because it was like, at this point, it's like, I just can't be bloody arsed with this, you know? Like, we're not going to be fighting these wars over and over again. The truth is, if he was smart, he should have done what he did with Italy and the HRE. He should have partitioned Spain, shouldn't he? Independent Catalonia. Independent Aragon. Independent Navarra. Why? Why?
France's alliance with Russia was a terrifying prospect. Together, the two could have been unstoppable. But unfortunately, the alliance didn't last. The Russians felt they weren't getting a fair deal.
Can you imagine buying this on plates? We're like, oh no, they've fallen out.
Fortunately, the alliance didn't last. The Russians felt they weren't getting a fair deal. Napoleon's Duchy of Warsaw right on their doorstep was a bit of an insult. And then their economy began to tank because of Napoleon's British blockade. And eventually, they began to open up trade. Your Majesty, it seems Alexander is no longer abiding by the continental system and has begun trading with the British.
You know, one other thing to make, I'm sorry for the pauses. One thing that's interesting to know is that when you create a puppet government, once again, the legitimacy of that puppet government is only based on people agreeing of its existence. So the idea of like storming into Russia and forming, I don't know, Ukraine and Belarus or something like that as a puppet state wouldn't really have worked because once again, the people need to believe the legitimacy of this state. And that's kind of the way it worked with the HRE in Italy because these were agreed upon in actual negotiations. The idea of just forming these puppet states and expecting them to exist and people to actually take them seriously, it wouldn't have happened, would it?
Alexander? But he kissed me. He kissed you? You wouldn't get it, Pierre. No one would ever kiss you. The security of Napoleon's empire depended on removing the British threat, and he wasn't happy with Russia's backdoor shenanigans. And so in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war. He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever seen, made up of troops from every corner of his empire, and he prepared to invade. Okay, it looks like Napoleon's coming for us. Generals, I need ideas. We could stand and fight. No, that's stupid. You're stupid. We could run away. You're a star. You'll remember Napoleon's tactics relied on astonishing speed to outmaneuver his enemy and force a...
So what happened to the living off the land and the core system then? Why did he send an individual, just a massive, big, fat stack that got lots of attrition? Why didn't he split them up and try and to, like, take out big chunks of Russia? Why did he just follow, like, a highway to Moscow?
Quick, decisive battle.
I guess he thought that when he took Moscow, it would all be over, wouldn't it?
Well, I've got 2 words for you. Scorched earth. If his opponent retreated while...
Well, it wasn't snow to begin with. When he went to Russia to begin with, it was like summer.
Scorching the earth, his men couldn't live off the land. And if his men couldn't live off the land, he needed his supply trains. And if he needed his supply trains, he couldn't move quickly. And if he couldn't move quickly, he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy. And if he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy, I think you get the point. Napoleon launched his invasion and hoped for a quick battle. But all he could do was try to catch the retreating Russians while moving deeper and deeper into hostile territory. As he went, the horribly hot summer devastated his army. His men died of heat, exhaustion, and disease. Supplies began to run out, and his men began to starve. Many deserted, and still the Russians continued to retreat.
They got so hungry they wanted dessert first. Disgusting. God, that's French. Yeah, like, why did he form a... Okay, maybe this is not a good artistic representation of what happened, but why did he form a narrow corridor? Why couldn't he split off in 3 different directions? Why didn't he do Barbarossa? That's what I'm saying. Huh? Why did he not do Barbarossa 100 years earlier?
Numerous times,
he should have encircled them.
Napoleon considered turning back, but that little voice in his head kept on telling him, keep going.
What is this? He's got spaghetti on his head.
Just a little further. And don't worry, you're definitely average height for the time. He nearly caught the Russians at Smolensk, but it was his birthday, so he had a party instead. When he finally reached Moscow, he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up.
I want to look that up. There's some part of me that says
average height for the time. He nearly caught the Russians at
Battle of Smolensk, 1812. Did you see that? It came up with 1942 as well. He doesn't mention anything about birthday. Was that just a joke? It was just a joke. Never mind. 1618. He was born 18... Oh, hang on. No. He was born the 15th of August. Oh, I guess it did coincide with his birthday then. Okay. But that was just a joke. It was just a joke. Okay.
Smolensk, but it was his birthday, so he had a party instead. When he finally reached Moscow, he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up such a historic...
Do you know... This is something, I don't know if they might touch upon this. I haven't watched all of this. I've only watched little segments. The real reason Napoleon failed was Spain. That was the real reason he failed. Sure, Russia's a very hard nut to crack. Don't get me wrong. But the truth is if they had the continental system for all of Europe, aside from Russia and Britain, I suppose that could have worked. But then again, a coalition would have came eventually, wouldn't it?
And Holy City without a fight. And he was right. The Russians finally turned to face him for the single deadliest day of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Borodino. The Russians fought valiantly, and as he got older, Napoleon's battle tactics seemed to become a little less refined and a little more run straight at the enemy, trying not to die.
I mean, this is good representation. He is getting impatient at this point. He's fought for like 20 years of his life, these repeat wars, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. At this point, he is mega impatient and frustrated that this is going nowhere.
He launched a full frontal assault at the Russian defenses, and as a result, the death toll was colossal. The Russians eventually decided to retreat, leaving Moscow to fall into Napoleon's hands. Quick, the French are taking the city. Release all these prisoners immediately and tell them to burn it to the ground. Well, well, Jimmy the arsonist, you are not going to believe your luck. Moscow went up in flames, and as Napoleon entered, it became very clear his army wouldn't be able to stay there very long. But he had just defeated the Russian army and taken their most beloved city. In his mind, he had won. So he sent Tsar Alexander in St. Petersburg a letter. Your Imperial Majesty, Napoleon requests your surrender. How shall I respond? You shan't, Dmitri. Ever? Ever. But, Your Majesty, it will be winter soon. The French forces are stuck 500 miles into Russian territory with dwindling supplies. If we don't say anything, well, then they'll all die. Oh! After waiting for a response for about a month, the first snow of winter began to fall, and Napoleon sensed the catastrophe that was about to unfold. He decided their only choice now was to get out.
Huel, not sponsored.
And that's when it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. His glorious invasion had just become a race for survival. As the Russians realized the French were fleeing for their lives, they began to close in on their supply line. Men froze to death, their horses as well. There was starvation and disease. The injured and dying could only be left by the side of the road, as it was too slow to try to carry them. And all along the way, the dreaded Russian Cossacks stalked the bleeding French army, and every now and then swept in for a quick attack. Napoleon, fearing capture, kept a vial of poison around his neck. At one point, the Russian armies nearly trapped him against the Berezina River, but a little Napoleon cleverness gave him the old Geoffrey juke, tricking them into thinking he was going south and then escaping across rapidly built pontoon bridges to the north. When the Russians realized where he was and began to close in, the French burned the bridges before every...
You know, this is an interesting point too. There's nothing about Russia that is geographically useful or advantageous to fight wars of attrition or scorched earth. There's nothing geographically about Russia that makes it an optimal place to do scorched earth. The only reason it works for Russia is because it's overwhelmingly vast. There isn't specific anything about the terrain that makes it perfect. It's more about, it's just an overwhelmingly vast amount of land. And they're willing, the Russians are willing to lose absolutely massive amounts of land before eventually counterattacking and winning. It's just based on the vastness, not based on any specific geographic nature of Russia in itself.
Everyone could cross.
I mean, there's no difference to... I mean, I can't speak too much about how harsh a Russian winter is or how harsh a Russian summer is, but I can't imagine it's very different from the rest of geographic Europe. I would imagine that the extremes of temperature in the UK are probably more extreme than Russia, being the fact that Russia is so inland. That's actually something I really don't know, actually. I would presume something that's more inland has less extremes of weather than something on the border of a major ocean. I don't know.
Hundreds drowned, and thousands were captured. At this point, Napoleon got wind of plots against him forming in
Weather is always more extreme inland? I would presume the opposite. Tell me why. UK is warmer from the water. Closer to Siberia. That doesn't really tell you anything now.
Paris.
Okay.
So he abandoned his men and went back to France. The remaining French stragglers made it across the border. It's been estimated over 600,000 men went into Russia. Less than 100,000 returned.
Much.
Napoleon was now in a very precarious situation.
Of Russia. No one else.
His army had just been obliterated,
joking.
and the other European leaders smelled blood. Here was an opportunity to take advantage of a weakened Napoleon, regain territory and influence, and liberate Europe from his dirty French paws. And so they began to turn. Prussia soon broke their alliance and switched sides, while Austria declared neutrality. Even Sweden, led by one of Napoleon's old marshals, joined the Allies, partly due to Napoleon's earlier invasion of Swedish Pomerania. The War of the Sixth Coalition had begun.
His own marshal would rebel against him. What the hell?
The coalition forces had been reforming their armies, and they were now much better. And the UK had also significantly amped up its financial aid to its continental allies. Their armies
More
quickly
Dogecoin.
advanced through Poland and into Germany. In Paris, Napoleon was understandably freaking out. He needed to put together a new army fast, and he called up over 100,000 new conscripts, mostly teenagers. He also put his factories into overdrive, and he was like, "You, make more rifles. You, build new cannons. You, make more horses. I don't make horses. Then who makes horses? Horses make horses. Explain how." Well, when a daddy horse and a mommy horse love each other very much. Yes, go on. Well, then the daddy horse... I'm sorry, Napoleon. You're 43. I thought you'd know this stuff. Don't touch me. I'm gonna be sick. As it turned out, Napoleon's lack of horses would take the biggest toll on his army, since his tactics
I was just
relied on
talking
speed,
before about cringe comedy. I was like, okay, maybe I would have cut that joke.
maneuverability, and destruction. When he took the fight to the Allies in 1813, he did defeat them and sent them running. But lacking cavalry, he was unable to effectively pursue and destroy. He needed horses.
No
For
speed.
the Allies, being defeated in battle by a man whose army was now full of inexperienced conscripts
Can't
was
do blitzkrieg
concerning.
without horses.
So both
Come on,
sides were
guys.
like, hold up, time out. The Allies were somewhat cornered, and had Napoleon kept going, it's possible he could have won. But instead he agreed to a brief truce with the Austrians mediating between the two sides. When Austria demanded Napoleon make major concessions, Napoleon told them to shove it. Having had their terms rejected, Austria felt now they were justified in saying, well, we tried, and they joined the coalition. Okay everyone, look at us. The boys are back together. But Napoleon is still dangerous, so we need a plan. Any ideas? Ooh, I know. No, forget it. That's stupid. No. I've got it! When he approaches, we run away. Genius. He's a genius. The plan was as follows. Wherever Napoleon advanced, whoever he advanced on would avoid battle, allowing the others to sweep in from the sides and attack the French marshals guarding his flanks. Essentially, the plan was, don't try to fight Napoleon. And this plan worked tremendously. The Allies scored a number of victories that saw Napoleon move back to the city of Leipzig, where he would make one last major stand as the Allied armies converged in on him from all sides. The stage was set for the biggest and bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Leipzig. Almost 500,000 troops from over a dozen nations stretched across the battlefield. The French found themselves fighting on all sides for 4 days against the Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and Russians. It's no wonder this battle is also sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Nations. The French fought ferociously, but ultimately were no match for the coordinated efforts of the coalition. At one point, in the midst of battle, Saxon troops allied with the French had a team huddle and were like, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the French are losing. Let's switch sides. And so they did. When it became clear that Napoleon couldn't win, he ordered a retreat across the only bridge over the river. The Allies swarmed into the city, and desperate fighting raged in the streets. Okay, Corporal, after everyone has crossed the river, I need you to blow up the bridge. Okay? Not before everyone's crossed, after. You got that? Yes, Colonel, I'm not 5. I can comprehend time. Good. Wait, did he say before or after? Well, fortune favors the bold. The bridge was blown early, and 30,000 French troops were stranded and captured. A disaster. And with that, the dominoes were beginning to come crashing down on Napoleon. In the south, an army under the British Duke of Wellington had been pushing the French out of Spain for the past few years, and were now crossing into France. Austrian armies had pushed into Italy,
Wellington?
while Napoleon's old flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat,
Imagine
who
losing to
Napoleon
a
had
boot.
made king of Naples, decided to switch sides.
Actually, is Britain the only nation that calls Wellingtons Wellington boots? Or is that a thing that's like across the pond as well? Or I don't know.
German states, many resentful after years under Napoleon's thumb, turned against him, and the Confederation of the Rhine collapsed. Bernadotte invaded Denmark, and they were forced to join the coalition, while the Netherlands were liberated. You'd think Napoleon might have seen the writing on the wall, but he was Napoleon, and so instead, he prepared to keep fighting. As attitudes in Paris were already beginning to turn against him, he called up more conscripts to defend the exhausted nation. As for the Allies, they weren't sure exactly what they were aiming for here. A few peace offers were floated that may have let Napoleon keep his position, but the British kept throwing around even more money, and eventually, they all agreed that the ultimate aim was the deposition of Napoleon entirely. And so, Napoleon embarked on one of his...
I think it's kind of interesting how history repeats itself. Like, for instance, if there's like a dictator that has so much power and influence and popularity, how the coalition against them has to acknowledge that the only reason we can get rid of them permanently is by deposing them. You know, like with Hitler. Like, because in World War I, they allowed the Germans to negotiate surrender, even though it was unconditional. Where in World War II, that never happened, did it? It was always like the ultimate aim was to get rid of Hitler. And I feel like in a similar way, the only way they could end these wars of coalition was the complete removal of Napoleon.
His most famous campaigns to defend the homeland. He was completely outnumbered, but the Allied armies had split up and spread out. His army was so small that he could move at lightning speed, and he used this to his advantage. In the famous 6 Days campaign against Prussian General Blücher, he attacked from all directions and defeated Blücher's forces 4 times, only suffering a tenth of the casualties he inflicted. Even with his back completely to the wall, Napoleon was still Napoleon. Then he turned south to take on Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia and enjoyed even more victories. However, Napoleon's problem was that he couldn't be everywhere at once, and wherever he wasn't, the Allies continued to push towards Paris. He made one last-ditch attempt at moving in behind the enemy lines and cutting off their communications, but Paris was in disarray, and the people were sick of war. One ambitious and slightly treacherous politician sent the Allied armies a letter basically saying, "Hey guys, come on in." And so,
one thing I feel like map games could learn from this is how potentially you can win battles against superior numbers. I mean, it's like in CK as well as EU4, and to a certain degree Hoi 4, it's almost impossible to win battles against superior numbers. Superior numbers is like the bread and butter, isn't it? And it's funny that there's no way of being able to outmatch superior size armies. It really frustrates me that a little bit. I feel like the next evolution of map games is where battles become a little bit more dynamic and involving. I know Imperator Rome tried to do that with the tactics system, even though it wasn't, it's a bit dice rolly. It's like a dice roll on top of a dice roll, you know, with the tactics things. It'd just be nice in the future that they would have more control of what's actually happening on the battlefield. It doesn't have to be Total War level, but it would be nice if there was just a little bit more depth.
they did. The city's defenders surrendered, and as the Allied leaders entered Paris, the people cheered them as bringers of peace. Paris had fallen. Quick, marshals, gather your men. We're gonna launch an assault on Paris. Where are my marshals? They all left and told me to give you this note. Napoleon's marshals had realized what he hadn't. It was over, and they insisted all that was left now, for the good of France, was for him to abdicate. And without the support of his army, Napoleon had no choice. He hoped his son could take his place, but it was decided instead to restore the old Bourbon monarchy. Old King Louis XVI's brother would become the King of France. It was almost like the French Revolution had never even happened. But what will we do with Napoleon?
I like how they've animated this character. How they drew him. I like the way he looks.
It was almost like the French Revolution had never even happened. But what will we do with Napoleon? We can't have a hyperactive 44-year-old menace running around reigniting revolutionary ideals and plotting his return. Well, why don't we send him, I don't know. There. The location chosen for Napoleon's exile was the small island of Elba, just off the coast of Italy. Napoleon was to rule over the island, and even got to keep the title Emperor of Elba. The Allies must have been in stitches when they came up with that. When he learned what his fate was to be, he drank the poison he had been keeping around his neck. But it had gone out of date, so instead of a quick and painless death, he got a painful stummy-wummy instead. Before he left France, he addressed his oldest and closest guard one last time, making an emotional speech that ended with him kissing their flag. And off he went to exile. The deal that was given to him was actually quite generous. His family were given titles, he was to receive a state pension from France, and he was able to receive many distinguished visitors, all eager to come and meet the famed emperor.
Hey, it's the spaghetti guy again.
And he ruled over Elba well, improving infrastructure and introducing many legal and social reforms aimed at improving life on the island. Hey Napoleon, just coming in to check on how it's all going. Holy smokes! But it wasn't all good. For one thing, he learned of the death of his first wife Josephine and was deeply saddened. He was forbidden from seeing his son and current wife, and in Austria, Emperor Francis had ordered a local count to seduce her so she would forget about Napoleon. Then, the new King Louis XVIII refused to give Napoleon his agreed pension. He was under constant threat of assassination, and there were even rumors that the Allies were thinking of relocating him somewhere even more remote. But the biggest problem was that Napoleon was once the master of Europe. He had lived a thrilling life of adventure, fame, and glory. Now, he found himself on a tiny island in the Mediterranean, and he was bored. Wouldn't it be nice if he could somehow return to France and reclaim his throne? Hey Napoleon, want to go back to France and reclaim your throne? I would, Pierre. But how? Well, I was thinking we could just take this boat. Will that work? Surprisingly, yes. Pierre, remember when I told you no one would ever kiss you? Yes, sire. Well, pucker up, boyo. Yay. When Napoleon left Elba, it wasn't really the daring escape you might think. He basically had kind of a leaving ceremony, hopped on a ship, and sailed back to France. He brought with him an army of about 1,000 men, and he began his journey to Paris. However, in Paris, there was now a new king, and at first, the people largely accepted him because the last few years of war under Napoleon had brought immense death and economic suffering. That's right, the king is back, baby. Divine right to rule. Don't worry, everyone. I know the economy is kaput, but I and my courtiers will withdraw into this palace, and we will definitely work as hard as we can to fix everything.
Like his car.
Oh yeah. That's why we got rid of the king. As the Bourbon monarchy began to look more and more like a return to the past, and the returning nobility seemed hellbent on regaining their lost privileges, the people weren't too happy. And so, Napoleon hoped that his glorious return would be met with jubilation. In the end, the reaction was a little mixed, but many were happy to see their old emperor. Your Majesty, it seems that Napoleon is back and marching this way with 1,000 men. That guy? No problem. I have hundreds of thousands of men. Send them to arrest him. Your Majesty, it seems the thousands of men we sent to arrest Napoleon have all joined his side. Well, I'm off to Belgium. If you ever need a king again, be sure to let me know. As Napoleon continued his journey, the king had sent battalions of men to stop him, but they largely comprised of Napoleon's old soldiers, many unhappy with King Louis's military reforms. So, when ordered to arrest him, they simply couldn't do it. In one famous incident, the troops began to cry out, "Long live the Emperor." When Napoleon reached Paris, with King Louis having fled, he entered unopposed to reclaim his throne. Napoleon was back from the dead. Okay, everyone, now that we finally...
How long was he in Elba? He was there 10 months. He got bored pretty quick, didn't he? Yeah. April 1814, he left in February to 1815.
Only gotten rid of that guy.
The reason I asked that is I wanted to see like if it was enough time for like the French army to recover its like, I don't know, manpower, I guess.
Try to make sure
map game terminology.
Something like this can never happen again. What's that doing there? Hey, fellow monarchs. This time, Napoleon promised he would be a mucho good boy and not start any wars. But the Allied leaders were having none of it. They declared Napoleon an outlaw and the illegitimate ruler of France. Then, they declared war. Not on France, but on Napoleon himself. And when you have multiple empires declaring war on you as an individual, that's how you know you're a very naughty
Fucking
boy. The
professionalism.
Allied powers began making plans to combine their forces and once again invade France. The most immediate threat to Napoleon were the British and Prussians hanging out in nearby Belgium. If Napoleon could knock them out
Belgium?
quickly, maybe he could force the Allies to negotiate, and maybe he could hold on to his power. Together, the two armies to the north outnumbered him, so he made a plan to divide them and take them on separately. Historians debate how much of a chance Napoleon had here, but this same strategy of dividing and conquering had worked for him multiple times. He marched north with 125,000 men and took on the Allies in a number of initial engagements, defeating the Prussians before turning to take on the British. But to Napoleon's dismay, miscommunication and hesitation among his marshals allowed both enemy armies to retreat, and crucially, rather than fleeing east, the Prussians moved north, where they could remain in contact with the British. Napoleon sent a force to hold off the Prussians as he moved in on the British, now holding a defensive position at Waterloo. Prussian General Blücher sent word that he would come to Wellington's aid if he could just hold off the French for long enough. Napoleon had to defeat Wellington before the Prussian army could arrive in force, and it was close. The British held the high ground and a number of key defensive buildings across the battlefield. After waiting some hours he didn't have for the ground to dry, Napoleon sent men to assault the Hougoumont farm, but the
Britain too
British
strong.
German garrison there held out. French Marshal Ney launched a number of miscalculated cavalry charges at the British lines. The British formed defensive square formations, and they tore the French cavalry to shreds, while one guy chose the absolute worst time to go on a bender. The French did manage to capture a farmhouse directly in
That
front
would
of the
be
British
me.
line, and
That
from
was
there,
literally
they
me.
unleashed artillery hellfire on the British
I'd
square
be so
formation.
scared of dying, I'd get so drunk. The whole battle would be a blur.
And as Napoleon sent his Imperial Guard in to finish the British off, a nervous Wellington knew his lines were at breaking point. But the Prussians had earlier begun to arrive, and now they were arriving in large numbers. And after the British held out and sent the French Imperial Guard running, the French lines panicked, fearing they had been encircled, and they began to flee. The Battle of Waterloo was an Allied victory. And with that, Napoleon's hopes of returning to glory were vanquished. He knew he was defeated. He went to the British and said, "Can I please have a house near London?" And the British replied, no. Instead, to make sure Napoleon was put away once and for all, they sent him to one of the most isolated and remote places they could think of, a tiny island in the Atlantic Ocean, St. Helena. Here, a deeply isolated and depressed Emperor Napoleon would live the remaining years of his life. His house was a wooden bungalow, not exactly on par with the Tuileries Palace. Much to his frustration, his captors referred to him as general, rather than calling him emperor. His mail was censored, his visitors were vetted. There was almost no way he could escape such an isolated island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 British soldiers and 2 ships that circled the island 24 hours a day. He had once been the most powerful man alive, and images of the victorious Napoleon depict a strong leader, hand firmly in jacket. Depictions of Napoleon on St. Helena show a disheveled old man, hand firmly in pants. He had lost everything. And by the way, he was only 46.
No.
So maybe it's about time you, you know what? You're doing all right,
I wonder if this is the guy. Is this the Oversimplified? Is this him? That'd be kind of funny if it was.
kid. Napoleon fought one last battle while on the island. The battle for his reputation. He spent hours writing his memoirs, espousing his achievements, recording his greatness, and turning himself and his story into a phenomenal legend. And in this battle, he certainly succeeded. His mark on history cannot be denied. After his defeat, the European monarchs had got to work restoring Europe to its traditional balance and reasserting their dominance. But after Napoleon had spread the influence of the French Revolution, these returning monarchs would have a difficult time regaining their absolute control. France returned to the rule of the Bourbons, but it would go on to stage another revolution, and then another one. Reaction to Napoleon's rule in places like Germany and Italy propelled forward the ideas and
France.
feelings of modern
Goddamn
unity
France.
and nationalism, and his Napoleonic code still
Oh, look at the size of Luxembourg there. Look at the girth on that Luxembourg. Oof. That is a Luxembourg to be proud of. So girthy.
ideas and feelings of modern unity and nationalism, and his Napoleonic code still remains the basis of law in various modern countries. The modern world owes a lot to Napoleon's legacy. He remains statistically possibly the greatest military general in history, and his revolutionary military tactics changed the face of warfare. He was the last truly great leader to both lead his armies in battle while retaining total political control over a vast empire. There's still hope for Joe Biden, but but the man remains somewhat of an enigma,
What a
and we still
reference.
aren't sure exactly what to make of him in some regards. Was he the champion of the French Revolution, spreading equality wherever he went, or did he betray it by making himself an absolute monarch and restricting certain liberties? Was he an ambitious and aggressive conqueror, hell-bent on bringing Europe to its knees? Or was he simply defending himself against an aggressive Europe, hell-bent on reducing his power? Some things will continue to be debated. Napoleon died at the age of 51, officially of stomach cancer, but some believe he may have been poisoned. The British buried him in a tin coffin, inside a mahogany coffin, inside a lead coffin, inside another mahogany coffin. I guess this time, they wanted to make sure he stayed where they put him. In 1840, his remains were moved to Paris, where they now rest under the dome of Les Invalides. The man from humble origins, with huge ambition, ruthless determination, immaculate skill on the battlefield, and a hefty dose of luck, who was determined to make his mark on history, did just that. There is no immortality, he said, but the memory that is left in the minds of men. And in that sense, Napoleon knew he would live on forever. Oh, and to reiterate, he was definitely average height for the time.
Clapper, 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 clap, clap, clapper, clap. That was great. If you enjoyed this, guys, don't forget to like and subscribe on my second channel, Feedback Dumping. All one word into Google, Feedback Dumping. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You've been great. I've been great. This has been Feedback Dumping. Goodbye. Bye, bye, bye.